Hi, English students. This is Miss Newman, and now it's time for us to take a look at the literary analysis essay. A literary analysis essay is where you analyze a piece of literature, so that could be a poem, a play, or in this situation, it's a short story. This type of essay analyzes a literary work by picking an aspect, so that could be a theme, tone, character, symbolism, etc., and illustrating an argument for the reader using textual evidence, so that would be dialogue or like speaking between the characters, and or a description that the author provides of like the setting or the situation. The writer should assume that the reader has read the work, and that's very important. You don't have to summarize the entire story, just summarize the parts that are most important for your argument. So just assume that the reader has already read the short story. The writer will prove a point without too much plot summary. If a part of the plot is summarized, it is to make a point for your overall argument. So if you find yourself summarizing a lot of what happened in the story, just make sure it is for a point. It's for one of your arguments about symbolism or a theme or something like that, pointing out an aspect of the story, not just summarizing for the sake of summarizing. The essay is due Wednesday, June 15th by midnight in content, and it is going to be worth a daily grade or attendance score. So I know that's a very fast turnaround, but unfortunately with this being a mini term course, it's only a 5-week course and we have 4 essays to cover. So unfortunately, just the math itself, especially with the research paper needing to take the longest, these essays are very quick turnarounds. But luckily, you won't have to do a works cited for this one. You had to do that for the research paper, and no works cited is required for this one. And it really is just your opinion of the short story. So try not to get too overwhelmed, but I'm here to help you through this if you need help. Also, don't forget that the Writing Center is available as well for online and in-person tutoring for your writing. But it is due Wednesday, June 15th. It's worth 20% of your final grade. An essay should be between 500 and 750 words in length. If you go over 750, that's fine, but just make sure you meet that 500 word minimum or your grade will be impacted. Your formatting is the same as always, 12-point Times New Roman font, double spaced with MLA heading and style. No surprise there, that's the exact same formatting as all your essays. The below topics are based on Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Cask of Amontillado. That's the only story we're covering this semester, so that is the only one you can write on. So even if you read other Poe short stories, or if you'd rather do another short story essay, this class is only going to cover The Cask of Amontillado, so that is the only one that you can write on. Luckily, the short story is very short. I've included a link in the week 4 folder to the short story, and it takes about 10 minutes to read. It's not a very long story, and it's pretty direct as far as what happens in it. But these are the topic options. You could focus on themes in the literary work. So for instance, revenge is a major theme. That's literally how the story begins, is revenge. There's also death is a major theme. I don't want to plot spoil, but death happens. And then, let's see, murder is another major theme, deception. I mean, as you read the story, you'll see that's essentially just some examples of major themes within the short story. But for a 5-paragraph essay, it makes sense to choose 3 themes and focus on them for those 3 body paragraphs. Tones, the author utilizes, so all of Poe's stories are very similar in tone. They're dark, they're creepy, macabre, scary. He's kind of like the Halloween author before it was popular to write about Halloween style stories. He was really dark and spooky, especially for his time period. So foreshadowing means hinting at how the end is going to end. So there's a lot of hints on how the story is going to end, some of the dialogue between the characters. Whenever they're toasted and he says, "I shall not die of a cough," and he says, "True, true." That's a foreshadowing example. Also, the fact that they're literally walking into the crypt surrounded by bones. That foreshadows the end as well. So there's several examples. I don't want to give too many away for those of you that might not have read the story quite yet. But there's a lot of foreshadowing in this story. So if you wanted to choose 3 examples, that would make a lot of sense for a 5-paragraph essay. Protagonists and antagonists. Protagonists are the heroes of a story, and antagonists are the villains. So if you wanted to focus on who the hero is in the story and who the protagonist is, there's only 2 characters in the story, so it's pretty direct as far as which characters to choose. But some argue that Fortunato could be a villain because we don't know the motive for Montresor. We don't know what happened before the story began as far as what kind of man Fortunato was, other than he was obviously an alcoholic. So some of my students have written some really interesting papers theorizing what Fortunato might have done to cause his ending. So that's one aspect. Or you could be more direct and do Montresor as the obvious villain and aspects that show how he's a villain. Symbolism means that essentially items symbolize ideas. So for instance, flowers usually symbolize love, or death if the flower is laid on the grave. Skulls always symbolize death, and there's a lot of skulls where the setting is because we're literally walking into a family crypt where there's bones and skulls everywhere. Alcohol is a symbol for alcoholism. Also, addiction, obviously. And then the crypt itself is very dark and mysterious. So you could argue that the crypt itself symbolizes mystery and not knowing our ends. There's the shovel itself. The shovel is the murder weapon. And so you could say that it symbolizes murder and also covering up murder because they literally use the shovel to cover up. So, but yeah, there's so many symbols within the story. Those are just some examples. But I want you to choose one that you're most interested in. So out of those, choose the one that you think you have the most material to work with, the most ideas about, what you're most interested to write about yourself. The final draft late submission rule is the same as always. It's 10 points off every day late past the due date. So just make sure you turn it in by midnight on Wednesday, June 15th, and you won't have to worry about that at all. All your drafts are going to be graded using the same grading rubric that I use every time and will be scanned with anti-plagiarism software. So just make sure that your ideas are only your ideas. There's no outside sources for this paper. Absolutely no outside sources. I'll explain why. What happens if I allow outside sources is I get ideas that I've read so many times that are just the same old ideas, like this symbolizes this, and it's like whatever sparknotes.com has published. And so I really want your own original ideas. So please don't use any outside sources. Definitely don't use whole essays online. That's an obvious no. But let's just make sure your own ideas are the ones that you're putting forward for this paper. I've got a spot for brainstorming and outlining for your own enjoyment as far as writing out notes, but you're not required to do that for this assignment. And please let me know if you have any questions. I know some of you, this might be your first literary analysis essay. So please let me know if you have questions. Also, don't forget the Writing Center services. They are very helpful, and they've tutored so many of my students for this essay in particular, so they know exactly how to help you through this. So you are not alone, and we will help you through this. And we're getting to the end of the semester already since this is a mini term. So after this one, it's just one more essay to go. So you're almost finished. You've got this. Thanks. Bye.